Hey everybody, it's Friday afternoon and we are going to take a trip around the world, but we're going to start here at my Waterfall Tank. I know we normally start at my 29 Miscellaneous, but the last round the world update I did it this way and I think it worked out better. So from now on we're probably going to be starting here at the Waterfall Tank. Once we have a look at it, I can get all the lights turned out and then we can look at the rest of the tanks without having quite so much glare on it. We're still going to get glare from my other open top tanks. A lot of that light shines around the room and that's what creates so much glare, but there's only so much I can do. We can, however, get this really bright source of light turned off once we've had a look at it. So not a lot to talk about. Since the last time we went around and looked at everything, I have gone outside and planted some stuff. I guess since the last time I did a Around the World update, we've got a few things to talk about. You can see right here is my daylilies. Those are starting to grow really well. They're really filling in, and as I said before, it will give us very much of a three-dimensional feel to the tank. It won't be long before we start seeing the flower spikes coming up. In fact, I keep checking for them and I don't see any yet, but it won't be long before we see some flower spikes coming up off of that. And back here we've got some sweet woodruff growing, and a little few pieces of grass are growing up through it. And I've got my water sprite back there, still looks like it's doing okay. I also should tell you, I just walked in the room, so we're going to do this Around the World update sort of together. I did walk around and wipe all the glass down, make sure all the lids were on square and the lights were positioned properly, but other than that, we haven't done anything, and I haven't really even spent any time looking in the tanks. So again, we're going to have a little look around the room together. Fish-wise, in this tank, I did lose a few guppies recently, and I just noticed as I was standing here looking at it now, we've got another dead guppy that is stuck to the filter intake. That was another one that I was really kind of surprised had lived as long as it did. It had a really twisted, crooked back from birth. It was one that had come out of one of my other tanks, offspring of some guppies I had upstairs, and it lived a pretty long life considering how crooked and twisted and small it was, but that too is now dead. So I've lost 4 guppies in this tank. 3 of them I lost over a 2-day period, and that was about maybe a week to 10 days ago, and now I've lost that other one. So other than maybe a little string of guppies dying out of this tank, not much to talk about fish-wise. Probably don't need to get in here and do a water change or anything. The water is dark, but that is also because I put a new cloth behind the tank. You used to get light coming in from the back, and now since I put a sort of an anti-glare drop cloth across the back of it, it reduces the glare on my New World tank. It lets less light into this tank, and we get rapid tannin build up in this tank too, and you can kind of see how that water is very tea stained. So that's what's going on and why the tank looks so much darker now. If we lifted up that flap in the back, we'd see a lot more light coming in there. My, whatever you call this tank, my foot tank, I always think of this as a tank at the foot of my waterfall. Still haven't done any maintenance on it. I probably talked about needing to do maintenance on it in the last Around the World update, but I have yet to actually get in there and do anything. The water's still flowing fine. I've still got very low nitrates. Water's nice and clear, so there's no indication that anything is wrong with my nitrogen cycle or I'm getting too much waste build up or anything like that. So I just keep topping it off, and as long as that filter's, as long as that pump is still moving water around and I'm seeing some water trickling around in there, I tend not to worry too much about it, and so far so good. Everything is looking alright in that tank. So other than, maybe a quick look at a few of the plants around the side and the periphery, not much else going on here with the waterfall tank. So let's get my one light turned off. You can barely even tell that does anything, and then this is the really bright light. And then we will finally get this one turned off here. And now we can go around without quite so much glare on the rest of the tanks. So here's my 29 Miscellaneous. Not really much to talk about in here either, at least nothing that I can think of. I did find a dead skirt Tetra in there the last time I did a water change about a week ago, I guess. and no idea why. Didn't know one was ill or sick. I never saw one swimming funny or looking bloated or anything. I just went in to do a water change, and there was a dead fish floating on the tank. That happens from time to time. Not that big of a surprise, but otherwise nothing really to talk about in here. I do need to get in and at very least top the tank off and change the filters out on this one. You can see I'm getting a lot of backflow through the center there again. Don't know what it is about this tank, but the biosponges on this one fill up really quick, and that's why I get that backflow so rapidly. It's not that the actual mechanical filters get clogged up, it's the biofilter that gets so clogged up on this tank. And so I got to get in there and wring that thing out as frequently as I do changing my filter pads themselves. About every other time I do that, I actually have to clean out the biofilter in this tank. I've never really understood why the biofiltration in this tank loads up so quickly the way it does. I don't know. Other than that, again, not a lot to talk about. Again, just to look at my 29 Miscellaneous. Here is my 55-gallon Gourami tank. And the most obvious thing about this tank right now is that sort of reddish, purplish color you can see in there. That is red cyanobacteria. And it's getting to the point now where I think we're about due for another ChemiClean treatment. I will shoot a video about that. I want to talk about the ChemiClean and the process, and even just my philosophy behind using the product, because there is a discussion to be had about the difference between, permanently eradicating the cyanobacteria and treating the tank differently, as far as the lighting and the way I feed it, the nutrient levels, all that kind of stuff. There are ways you can prevent the cyanobacteria, and then you can simply just treat it. And so treat it with ChemiClean or some other similar product. There are a few other products that treat for the cyanobacteria. So there's a discussion to be had about the pros and cons of either approach that you take. I have taken the approach of simply treating it every now and again rather than altering the way I treat the aquarium in an overall sense. So I know I'm throwing the word treat around there interchangeably, but I think you followed along with that. Hopefully you did. At any rate, we will be having a video about that, and we can have that conversation with a little more clarity in its own right. So that's something to look forward to, so make sure you're subscribed and you won't miss that or anything else. Otherwise, not much to talk about going on in here. I haven't really done any work in there. You can see the glass has plenty of algae growing on it. You can see the scrape marks and stuff from the various algae eating and off-walks grazing fish that I have in there. Getting on the glass and scraping that clean a little bit, but I still need to get in there and wipe the glass down myself. Otherwise, again, not much going on, so we will move on to my 55-gallon tank. Likewise, nothing really going on in here. I'm hoping that I will get another breed out of my diamond tetras. I talk about that a lot because I was delighted to find, not too long ago, I found 4. I guess they were bigger than fry, but they were still pretty small. I guess they'd be fingerlings or something like that. I don't know what you'd call the earlier stages of a young fish. But they were really small, smaller than a dime, and I got them out. I took them upstairs. I put them in my office tank where they look fantastic. And ever since then, I've been waiting and looking and hoping to find more little baby diamond tetras swimming around this tank, because they are really one of my favorite fish. I really, really like those diamond tetras a lot. And if you're a regular viewer of mine, you will know I gush about those fish all the time. I really like them. So you can see a little bit of the behavior going on right now. Maybe we'll get a little bit of spawning or not. I don't know. But the trick is, of course, once they've spawned, I've got a bunch of tetras in the tank, which will definitely eat eggs and eat small fish and whatnot. So having them survive to be big enough to collect out of there is the trick. And of course, we've also got the angelfish, and I've got these other hatchet fish, which is another species of tetra. So I'm sure if they got the opportunity to nab a little tiny fish swimming near the surface or whatever, I would imagine those hatchet fish probably would take that opportunity. And of course, we know the angelfish certainly would. So getting some of them in there to, breed is one thing, but getting those babies to actually get big enough for me to collect them out of there and put them in another tank is another story. So hopefully one of these days we'll see that happen. Otherwise, once again, not much going on in this tank, so we'll move on to my 40 breeder here. And I have not done anything to this tank except for a water change recently, and when I did the water change, I found out that the nitrates in this tank were pretty low. And as I looked around, I found out that the number of fish in this tank has just sort of dwindled over the years. And I'm down to just a few of the Raspora, I'm down to a few of the glow light Tetras, and even the rainbow fish, there's only a few of them left. But I've never had luck with these Australian rainbow fish, and I've not actually spoken with anybody that ever has had luck with these Australian rainbow fish. And I guess that's why they're sold for $2.99 at the big chain pet store, rather than, you know, the $12 or $15 each that you'll see for most other species of rainbows. Not really sure why, but my dwarf pike cichlid is hiding down there underneath the log. I just saw her a few minutes ago. Of course, I did point out that I came in and I wiped down the glass with a cloth and some Windex, so that always kind of freaks the fish out whenever you're wiping your hand rapidly across the glass with a white paper towel in it. So she might still be stressed out from that and kind of hiding, laying low. But otherwise, again, not much going on. I'll once again say I really need to get in here and do some work on this tank, but as of yet, I still haven't actually done that. I noticed today I'm starting to get some green growth on the substrate itself, and the rocks are starting to get some green growth covering them. Oh, there's my dwarf pike. She's sticking her face out a little bit looking at us. So I'm not sure if that's cyanobacteria or algae. It looks like cyanobacteria, but I'm not 100% sure. Either way, this tank really needs to get opened up. I've got really poor circulation through here. Talking about poor circulation, I was thinking I could get it a pair of like compression socks or something like that, and that might help. But that is not the kind of poor circulation that we've got in this tank. We have got a spray bar that moves water around the surface, but that's about it. And then I've got a power head in the back that looks more like a chia pet at this point. It's got so many things growing on it and stuck to it that have been there for so long. I'm sure the roots are in there and impeding the water flow. You can see the movement, so the water is still flowing, but again, it's, I really need to get in there and get that cleaned out and just do some overall work on this tank. One of these days I will, and we'll make a video out of it, and bang, at the other end of the video, this tank will look like I just went and, completely revamped it. But it's just a matter of me getting around to being in the mood to doing it. So, once again, make sure you're subscribed and you won't miss it. It'll be coming up one of these days. This is my current obsession right now, and that is my 125-gallon New World tank. I'm just absolutely in love with this tank. I really love the way that woodwork looks. Now that the water sprite on the top is growing into the point where it's creating some sort of dapple sunlight effect, and you're getting some shading and shadowing in the tank. The ripple effect on the water with the LEDs gives it that sort of sparkly sunlit effect. And then, of course, all those schooling fish in there drifting gently back and forth looks awesome. And I'm really happy with the way those silver dollars turned out. And, of course, my angelfish in there looks absolutely amazing. And as of late, I have been seeing my tilapia come out a lot more. I don't know if maybe now that we're getting some larger schooling fish in there, maybe these silver dollars and the angelfish are starting to make her feel a little more comfortable. But my tilapia has been coming out a lot more than she used to. Of course, right now she's not. She's back in her corner where she always hangs out. But I have been seeing a lot more of her. And so, again, that just makes me happy. She's a gorgeous fish. And it's nice to see her out swimming around. She was even out during feeding the other day and did not go and hide when I came in and fed the tank. She actually stayed out for the first half of the feeding before she drifted away, which is unusual. My water sprite's starting to grow up and out of the tank, and that's starting to look a lot more natural and sort of outdoorsy, which is what I want. I'd really like that to get to the point where it's sort of bushy and looks, like a bush growing up out of the top of the tank. So we'll see if we ever get to that point or not. I've certainly got plenty of light for it to do that. Otherwise, not much to talk about. I did do a big water change the other day, and I mean a big one. I did probably a 60% water change just to get the huge volume of tannins that build up in this tank. This water gets tea stained very fast, and while I do like that look, I also like to be able to see in the nice bright clear water and see the fish swimming around in all their glory and everything else. So, it's always a struggle between how much do you let the tannins build up and how frequently do you change them, or do a water change and get them out of there and then let them start building up again. So I did about a 60% water change, got the glass wiped down, didn't mess with the filter or anything, just got the tank nice and bright and water cleared up. And now it looks like this. So otherwise, not much going on, not much to speak of. I do still need to get my 2 creek chubs out of the tank. There's one, there's the other. They're going to keep getting bigger and bigger until they become problematic. My big shiner right there probably should come out of the tank. I've noticed a few injuries here and there as of late, and I believe it's from banging into stuff, swimming around, dashing around the tank. And then right there on the bottom, you can also see that large suckerfish back there. That one is still growing and has a long way to go before it's full grown. So that's another one that needs to come out of there. So these 2 creek chubs right here, and then those 2 fish in the back probably need to come out. And once I've done that, we'll be set, and this tank will be where I want it. But again, for now, I'm just absolutely in love with this. I really, really like the way it's developed and changed over the last 6 months. Really, really happy with this tank. Anyway, moving on. Not much to talk about in my snail tank. I did pull a rock out of another tank the other day, and I noticed it had snail eggs all over it. So instead of just letting the snail eggs die, I threw it in here. Not really thinking that one through, so now that one's just kind of in here, because if I take it out now, it has even more snail eggs on it, and so my only option is to just take it out and let the snail eggs die, or leave it in there and let them all hatch and contribute to my snail tank. And of course, you can see in the back, I've got lots and lots of snails going on in there. That white stuff is broken up pieces of eggshell, and I do have a broken up piece of cuttlebone in there as well, and that provides calcium for the snails so that their shells stay nice and hard, and then that in turn provides calcium for my puffer. And of course, the hard shells also help wear down the teeth of the puffer, which is the whole point of giving them the snails in the first place. So my 40-gallon purple spotted gudgeon tank here has basically become the home for my temple plant, or swampweed, hygrophila. It's really, really doing well. It's growing out of control crazy. I'm getting nice, pretty little purple flowers on it. I'm really digging that. But as I suspected, it is just sucking all the light out of the tank, or I should just say it's blocking all the light from getting into the tank. We get a few streaks here and there, but for the most part, the tank is really, really dark now. The tank is also really, really overgrown now. You can see how much, I got going on in there. So I really need to get in this tank and get it cleared out and get some of those roots cleared out, get some of the vegetation cleared out, and quite frankly, the glass itself could really use a good wiping down. So for the people not familiar with this tank, if you're wondering, is this an actual fish tank or is it just a garden? Kind of a little bit of both. It does have some fish in it, but it's basically just an aquatic garden fish tank. I've got a purple spotted gudgeon in here, which does very little of anything until it's feeding time. You can kind of just make out its silhouette right there hiding in the darkness. And then I've got a South American bumblebee catfish that lives in a cave right there, which every once in a blue moon we get a little glimpse of a fin or something like that as it turns around or readjusts itself, so we know it's still in there and still alive. But other than that, that is it. I used to have a rubber lip pleco in here, but it has been so long since I've seen that fish that I'm going to assume the gudgeon probably harassed it to death, because that's the only reason I've only got that fish in here. The gudgeon harasses every fish. I had the tilapia with it. It harassed the tilapia. I think I had a sunfish in with it at one time. The gudgeon just harasses any fish that I've put it with, even larger, more aggressive fish, and of course anything even close to its size will just get eaten by it. So this is the gudgeon's tank, and I don't even think about putting anything else in there unless it's something like feeder shrimp or feeder fish, but that's about it. Like I say, this is basically the gudgeon's tank, and then I use it to grow Aquatic Plants, because I like that, and that is awesome. So one of these days I'm going to have to get in here and do something. It's growing right up into the light again, and I can't really raise the light too much more. So probably going to come in and give it the old whackety chop. We'll go around and we'll snip all of these off. I can make cuttings out of all of them. I'll get a bunch of new plants, and then we'll sort of start over from a much lower, but it will be a bushier and denser growth once it restarts. So we'll see. My 125 gallon tank will come around here so we can get a look at the whole thing. Now, this tank has probably got the most going on out of any of my tanks at the moment, and that is because of my now 2 clown loaches. I had 3 clown loaches in here, a small, medium, and a large. The small one was skinny and emaciated. It looked like it was suffering from what is commonly referred to as skinny disease in loaches. It's a wasting disease caused by a parasite in the gut. And eventually, despite all of the attempts to medicate it, I did lose the smallest one. The largest one still looks okay, and then the medium-sized one is a little bit skinny too. You can definitely tell it's not nice and plump and healthy like it should be. If you can see that sort of pale colored line right there above, like kind of behind its eye, that is like a ridge of bone under the skin, and it really does sort of jut out and stick proud of the fish's body, almost like you can think about like somebody that's real skinny. You can see their collarbone sticking out. That's kind of what that is like on that fish. So that gives you a good idea of how skinny the fish actually is, that you can see that physically like that. So the other one got so skinny that it eventually died, and I don't think my attempts to medicate it had any impact whatsoever. The good news is this one is now beginning to behave a little more normally. The fact that it's out and about and swimming around is a good sign. For the last several weeks, it's been doing nothing but just lying up against the heater in the back of the tank. I did raise the tank temperature a few degrees. We're up to 79 degrees now. I did have it at 75. So the slightly warmer temperature probably makes the loach feel a little bit better. My larger loach I don't see at the moment, but that one has always looked okay, and its behavior has been pretty much normal throughout. So I'm not too concerned about that one, but I do think that my full tank medication may have had an impact on this loach, because it definitely seems to be behaving better or more normally. So from now on, I'm going to be paying attention to its feeding and make sure it really is eating again. I've also been feeding the tank with the medicated food, and now that it's acting a little more normally, I'm hoping some of the medicated food might get eaten. And I'm also putting live food in there. I'm putting live snails in there, so that's a good high protein, good high source of nutrition, plus it gives the fish activity and enrichment. All around, I think this one's going to recover, provided I stay on top of the medication. I'm going to have to wait a few weeks and then medicate the tank again, because the medication I use does not affect the eggs of the worms that I believe were the culprit. So any eggs that were in the tank or any eggs that were in the fish will hatch and will be out and in the tank again within a couple of weeks, and so I will have to do another cycle or two of the treatment. The good news on that is I bought a cattle wormer, and the cattle wormer is the same medication that I would use if you bought it for fish. I was just able to get like 65 grams of it for $20, or 52 grams of it or something for about $20, and that is enough to treat this tank 22 times or 23 times or something like that. So I'm good to go. I don't have to worry about it. Just every so often I'm going to treat this tank, and I'm going to continue doing that until I see that loach get back to normal. And hopefully we'll be able to get it through, and I will be able to get my loaches back to nice and plump and fat and happy and eating and healthy, and everybody will be happy. Otherwise, not really anything to speak of going on in this tank either. I really do need to get in and do a water change on this one. I did a bunch of water changes all around the fish room last week, and since then I've been kind of hit or miss with my maintenance. I feel like I got it all done in one shot, and I've been kind of slacking ever since. So it's about time to get in here and start getting caught up on water changes, filter changes, and that sort of thing. And so now we move on to my 20-gallon Angelfish tank. This is another one that I definitely need to get in there and consider doing a treatment with the ChemiClean. All of the stuff you can see on the glass here is just algae, and you can even see the scrape marks from the clown pleco I have in here. And that's, you know, the clown pleco's been working on the glass. I'll get in there and I'll wipe the glass down when I do a water change. That's fine. This stuff on the bottom that's growing like a green carpet, that is, sometimes it's referred to as blue-green algae, but that is also cyanobacteria. It's not the red cyanobacteria, it is the blue-green cyanobacteria, but it will respond exactly the same to the ChemiClean treatment. So this is another tank that, I don't know, maybe twice a year I have to get in here and give it a simple treatment. Again, there's the conversation about, do I change the way I, handle this tank or maintain this tank, and do I change the way I feed it and change the way I light it and so on and so forth, or do I simply just throw some ChemiClean in here twice a year and forget about it? Again, that's the route I've taken, and we can have a discussion about that in the near future too, because I will be shooting some video talking about this tank when we get in and do the ChemiClean treatment. Otherwise, not much going on. I did get in here recently and thinned out some of this water sprite. You can see how, that scared me for a minute. I wasn't sure what that was when it hit my hand. Not too many babies left in here. I mean, you can get in and pull a few of them out, but for the most part, I got in not long ago and I pulled a bunch of the thick stuff out of the middle to open that up a little bit. I'm always on the fence with this one. I really like the way it looks when it starts growing up and out of the tank. If you've ever seen any of my yard tour videos, you know I like my gardens and I like my flowers and my plants and everything. And it's always a cross between, or a toss-up between how much do I let that develop and how much do I open the tank up to let the fish get in there and swim around. Right here is a pretty good example. It looked like some roots hanging down of a offshoot. See, I can just pull whole plants out of there and open that up while keeping, the larger plant intact. But at some point, that larger plant gets so large and those roots get so extensive down into the tank that it just becomes too much. And I think we're kind of getting there at this point now. So we'll see. Again, make sure you're subscribed. That way you won't miss the updates on this tank or any of the other ones. Moving on to my... Ooh, I almost dropped my phone from a wet hand there. Moving on to my puffer tank. I do have something to report about in this tank. Just this very morning, I found my orange sailfin molly. The one remaining orange sailfin molly that was in this tank was in there floating and dead. So, as far as I know, my figure 8 puffer butterbean here is the only fish that's left in this tank. The last of the bumblebee gobies, I think, is gone. And I did see butterbean swimming around with the dead bumblebee goby in its mouth not too long ago. But since then, I have not seen any. And I just assume they are all now gone and we are down to just having butterbean here in the tank. So at some point, I will get back to the fish store and I will start adding some fish here and there to some tanks. And this is probably one of them that I'll put something in. Again, once the, world opens back up a little bit and gets going. I believe I could probably go down to the fish store now. From what I've been told by at least one of my viewers, is that my good fish store, the House of Tropicals, is still allowing a limited number of people in the store at a time. And so as long as I was willing to do that, I could go down there. But as far as I'm concerned, going out to buy more fish right now is not exactly, essential travel. So I'm not going to worry about that for now. Like I said, we'll just wait and see what happens as time goes on. And sooner or later, we will be getting back to where I can put some stock back in some of these tanks that I've lost a few fish in recently and that sort of thing. But other than that, not much going on to talk about in here. As you can probably tell, I do need to get in and do a water change. And if nothing else, I need to clean out the snail shell graveyard in there. That's what all that white stuff is, if you were wondering, or if you're unfamiliar with this tank. I feed butterbean live snails about once every, 3 or 4 days. 3 or 4 days a week he gets live snails in addition to his freeze-dried krill. and that is the bulk of his diet. In fact, that's the entirety of his diet. I can't remember the last time I gave him anything other than the krill or the shrimp. I mean the snails. So that's about it. Need to get in there, do a water change, get this tank cleaned up. I will do a video when I do the water change on this tank, as I always do. And that brings us all the way back around to more or less where we started. We're going to skip over the waterfall tank because I'm just going to say goodbye at this one. Don't forget, this one here is my 29-gallon miscellaneous. Thanks for joining me on my trip around the world. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you real soon in the next one.